No, the best dad joke I've got, is my number one, is two peanuts walking down the street, one was assaulted. Yeah, it gets a laugh every time because it's so bad.
That's good. That is good. I like that one.
Has nothing to do with fishing though.
Yeah.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us for another episode of Flies 4. This week we're doing Flies for Runoff. Today we're at the home of Landon Mayer, one of our signature tires and guides. Landon, thanks so much for joining us today.
Welcome. It's great having you guys here.
Yeah, we've totally taken over your living room and we love it.
It's taken over. We're going to do all the fly talk, and with the Dreamstream backdrop, it's perfect, man.
Yeah, if you guys can't see it, in this right behind Landon's a photo of the barn that it kind of came from. It's super cool to have this behind us here. It's kind of a little piece of what we're going to be talking about today.
Little piece of our history too.
Totally.
We were there and we did the photo shoot with Johnny from Fish Pond. It was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reliving memories, man. Bringing them back.
Yeah, and as I'm sure this thing would tell stories if you could talk.
For sure. 100%.
Well, it's that time of year where I think everyone gets a little bit afraid of what they're seeing as they see, you know, stream gauges start to creep up. And we're going to talk about how to keep fishing through that time of year and kind of open up eyes and possibilities to some new stuff. So Landon, why don't you tell us a little bit about some of your home waters where you get to fish and kind of develop a lot of your flies and kind of what you do?
Well, yeah, I'm happy to do it. So South Platte River is my home waters, and from top to bottom, it's starting in South Park near some of the headwater zones, Spinney Reservoir, Antero, 11 mile. 200 miles in circumference. It's like Disneyland for anglers. Like, I love this spot. There's tailwaters, there's freestones in the Arkansas River furthest west. You have the stillwater game with trophy fish, and you have migration. And dealing with runoff and everything considered, it's one of the favorite zones for me because you have options to hit stillwater, river, and freestone in the course of one calendar day, one guide day.
It's crazy.
You can hit all three. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. And then flowing down 11-mile canyons where I go fish personally. It's where I learned how to fly fish, taught my son how to fly fish, you know, passing on the heritage, which is really special and dear to my heart. And then moving down from that through Deckers and some of the zones around Cheeseman Canyon. It's an amazing fishery. The cool thing about the South Platte River, in my opinion, too, is that every one of the fisheries, every one of the tailwaters represents a different flow, a different backdrop, you know, different scenery. So you become a better angler because essentially you're fishing 5 different rivers, but it's all one identity. It's super cool.
Which is super cool. And I think for any of you who haven't been up to this area to experience South Park and the South Platte, you've got Denver and Colorado Springs, two of the largest major metros within kind of spitting distance or arm's reach of the South Platte. And so
for sure.
I think the quality of angler that comes out of that South Platte region is super high because you've got to be diverse. You've got to be able to do things that maybe other people aren't doing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so many good anglers, so much talent. Whether it's fly design, you know, close to home, Charlie Craven, so many other anglers in the area that are doing the same thing, John Barr, your headquarters right here in Louisville. It's like having all of that fish pond. There's so many companies, so many anglers, and there's so much knowledge spread around. Cool thing about the system and the family or group of anglers we have here too is everybody's willing to give back. So it's not as if somebody's challenging another angler, they're challenging you to become a better angler and willing to share the information, which is super cool.
Giving back in other ways, you host Clean the Dream. You host Clean the Dream every year too, which is super cool.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, we're going to do it again this year, 3rd weekend in August. It's a gathering. Last year we had 275 volunteers come up, which is crazy. Got a call from Waste Management. They're like, you literally collected 2,400 pounds of trash metal and rubber. We're like, yes. And
it's amazing.
It's grown. Like, I appreciate that. It's a great opportunity for families to come together. You teach your youth. Leave it as you found it, leave it cleaner than you found it. Every person, every piece of trash makes a difference, and we're now cleaning all of South Park. It's not just the Dreamstream. So we clean Badger Basin, Tomahawk, Antero, Ranch 63, 11 Mile State Park, the Dreamstream. It's amazing to have everybody come together. And it's a huge celebration, and like you guys have done, all these great companies donate a raffle, but it's a great celebration. We'd love to have you on board, and we'll do a big announcement this year. It's gonna be cool.
Sweet, we'll keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Well, Landon, on the fly design, you've been an Umpqua tire for how many years now?
I can't believe it, quite some time. So in reference to years, I was first on board as a family member to Umpqua in 2007. So first flies accepted, I turned them in 2006, and I would see Umpqua, you guys, everybody from the company at shows, see you on the water. Went to one of the ISE shows in Denver and walked into the booth. They're like, you should submit some flies. And one of my mentors and good friends is John Barr. And I was like, all right, I can give you some flies that are in my box. So I sent over 3, got a call from Bruce Olson. He said, hey man, I got 3 shiny bugs in a box here, multiple sizes. I like what I'm seeing. I'm like, pull over, call my clients, be like, I'm 20 minutes late. I got to take this call. Super excited. And that moment for me was really big because it wasn't me designing a fly to turn in. It was me actually taking a fly out of my box that I use to find success on the water. And I was taught that through JB. John Barr is unique in many ways, not only a great angler, great friend, great person, but he's the only angler I've ever met where you open up his box and it's literally his bugs. He's fishing his bugs designed for trout and bass and carp and all these different, amazing
destroys
fish.
it too.
Destroys it. Like they all work, they all have a reason, they all have a history and a backdrop and a background about how they evolved, how they came to be. So being on that same line, it's like taking the fly that we know is productive, we know works, and then supplying it to you guys, and you guys were kind enough to pick it up.
And that's what Umpqua does. I mean, that's all of the signature patterns we have in our box. They're not Instagram flies. They're a lot of guide flies. They're a lot of proven track record. And we get a lot of submissions where it says, well, it catches fish. We're like, well, obviously, it better.
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of that's handing off that confidence, and that's what we're trying to do with a lot of these episodes here is to like take that knowledge, that the little subtleties of the fly design, and start to hand it over to anglers to go find some success and have great days on the water.
And I think it's huge. I mean, the biggest thing is the confidence in knowing the fly works. What I think helps Umpqua, you guys stand out as a company and all of us as designers, the flies represent productive days from the designer on the water. And then it's trust that you build or find in a company like Umpqua or that designer that gives you a chance to allow other people to find the same success. And I mean, a good example of that is 2007, the mini leech was submitted.
That was amongst the first 3.
First 3, mini leech, Mayor's Myces, and the tube midge. And it took 10 years, a solid decade, for that fly to catch on. And it wasn't catching on because of exposure, it was catching on because more people started to fish it and believe in it. And as that happened, there was more demand built up. It was a long, slow progression, but I appreciate that. And that's where I think the foundation and roots of a good fly design really come from. It's like that fly is going to work forever. It's a staple in your box, now a staple in other anglers' boxes, and it helps everything evolve. And it's the same representation as a company tied for the water. It's cool.
And I'm so excited to dive into the mini leech. That's going to be one of the flies we highlight here, and we're going to talk about that one more. But before we jump into that, I want to hear what Landon Mayer's best day on the water looks like.
That's a great question. Every day is the best day for me, but it sounds cliche, but here's what I mean by that. It's when I have a chance to drive over Wilkerson Pass and dip down in the South Park, and I'm sipping coffee and I look at the landscape, I'm like, it's crazy to me, even to this day, 27 years guiding, that I still do this and can make a living at it. It blows my mind. And it just shows that people not only have trust in what you do, but reputation is everything. It's how you grow yourself in the sport. You can have all the marketing you want, but if people trust you and they enjoy your organic enthusiasm and you bring that to the table every day, it makes a great day. And I think for me, the 2 experiences I love the most is a brand new angler, first fish. They land a first fish in a fly, and it's so cool because it can be a big fish, a small fish, but it's the build up to that point. They don't have a lot of confidence to start out. It's positivity is the choice. You make that choice available to them. They land the fish. You're like, yeah, everybody's high-fiving. It's crazy, right? It's fun.
We've got a photo you guys are going to have to see that will drop in. You helped make that best moment happen for one of our guys on the Umpqua team, Sam Hetzel, and got him his first. Yeah. And like the stoke from the whole team was an 11.
It's beyond contagious.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. So that, for me, is one of my best days. And then taking an experienced angler and showing them something new, whether it be the simple details in the sport, in my opinion, make you better, but something new, whether it be a simple detail they learn, a new technique, or a new way of fishing, river to stillwater, or from land to boat, like whatever that transition is, but giving that experienced angler the opportunity to believe in themselves that, oh, I am still a student. I can learn more. And then the stoke's even higher for them.
Well, I feel like anytime you feel like you've got something down, you meet someone new, and you're like, well, I actually realize I have no idea about this part of our sport.
You cannot, You
pick up a new, two-handed rod or saltwater and you're like, I'm a beginner again.
You are.
And you get to relearn the whole thing and get excited about it. That's the beauty of the never-ending sport. And
it's amazing.
You say every day is my best day, and you're one of the few people I actually believe that, because your positivity for being as long as you've been in the sport is incredible. It's contagious.
Thank you.
And I think it's reflected in a lot of what you bring to the table on the fly side too, where it's all designed to help anglers have those moments and those little best days for all of them out there. So at this point, what I want to do, Landon, is jump into some of these flies for Runoff. What we're going to talk about with Landon's flies today, which is going to be so cool, is the diversity of these bugs. And you're going to see, we're going to start with the mini leech jig and the mini leech. And I'm a huge fan of it just because, like, when we talk about Runoff, it's like the #1 in my mind. And tell us why.
It brings a smile on my face every time. And the reason it brings a smile, so we'll start with the mini leech. So 7th year guiding, I was like, man, I had a breaking point. I was like, all right, I've got to figure something out. Like, attractors worked. It was runoff season when this happened. Went home one night and I'm like, man, I'm fishing eggs, I'm fishing scuds or crustaceans, I'm fishing worms. And it just hit me. It's like, all right, so eggs happen when fish spawn, right? Or they migrate to spawn. Scuds work when there's an increase in water or flow, rips them up and moves them around, right? Worms start to seep in from the edge when there's heavy rainfall. Those all work, but it's very seasonal based and time frame based. And I needed a confidence fly. I needed something that I could put on my rig, whether it caught the fish or even attracted the fish over, that made a difference. And that's where the mini leech came to be, because what I realized after fishing in the North Platte with the Hamrick brothers and John Barr's slump buster broke on the bend. This 2007. And we started fishing it with just the rabbit off the collar. And we were swinging it through riffled runs, and it was twitching and undulating and like driving fish nuts. The bite went up even twofold. And we get done and I'm driving back and Jason Hamrick's like, man, I actually received the first box of micro pine squirrel from Wapsie, like this massive cardboard box. And he's like, I'm pulling all these things out, I'm checking them out. He's like, oh my God, it's like a smaller version of a streamer. So when I went back, I tied in olive and quickly realized that if I use this to match leeches, it's one food supply found all year for trout, just like a midge. So midges are found year round, leeches are found year round. They can't escape trout, so it's a non-escaping food supply. High water, low water, dirty, clear water, you can always fish a leech. And that's where the leech was born.
And so when you're talking about mini leech, give us the size range of these things.
Yeah, so sizes of leeches range, in my opinion, from the home waters and traveling abroad. It usually is 1/2 inch by seining or picking up rocks, all the way to the 3 or 4 inch big gnarly ones. The ones that you see and you're like, all right, I'm no longer wet wading. Those guys, too big. But the smaller, I usually fish them about 1 inch to 1.5 inches.
And what size hook are we putting those on?
Yeah, 2488H, super strong, straight shank, straight eye. And I'll fish them on a smaller note, size 16 to 14.
Okay.
A larger note, I can be all the way up to size, I would say even 6, size 4. So you can really upsize the potential for hooking gap scenario and also size of the fly to show or represent the food supply to the trout. I think the larger versions are found more in still waters, and a lot of the smaller versions found in river settings. Yeah.
So you talk about the TMC 2488 on the mini leech.
Yes.
We do the XC400 on the mini leech jig.
Yes.
Let's talk about the little differences between those two.
Sure. So the first evolution of the mini leech, unweighted, because I wanted it kind of mid-column. Then I realized quickly, fishing Pyramid Lake, fishing all the different spots in Patagonia, South America, all these different travels, like anchoring flies, or most importantly, a balanced leech. You go to Pyramid Lake, you go to the Great Lakes, and Pyramid's probably the biggest identifier to this food supply and imitation, where you take a 90-degree jig hook, you put a pin in the front with a tungsten bead, you balance it, extends the body, and then literally when it's hanging below a fly, it's balanced.
Level and like
down.
It doesn't tip head down,
Exactly.
It doesn't ride head up, it's
level. And then every bump, wave, riffle, or strip, it's jigging. It's
and then it returns to that
level position.
Yep.
So it's that maximum movement. If you see leeches, they're like ribbons, they swim. It's very similar. So I decided, okay, instead of just adding a weighted bead to the mini leech, let's put a slotted tungsten bead on the 60-degree jig hook, as you mentioned, And then by attaching this with an improved clinch knot, it's balanced. The advantage here is because it doesn't have the extending arm in the front, you can get a smaller profile. You have versatility in how you rig this, which we'll go over later. In addition to that, it also isn't difficult to pull out of the water. Some of those flies, it's like pulling a saucer plate out of the water. When you have a balanced leech, it can be quite difficult. So that's why I decided this is the ultimate way to set up a weighted version of a leech. And the biggest difference, which you see in videos and we've spoken about before, the skin on the mini leech is facing towards the hook shank because we want a faster sinking rate. We want movement and freedom of motion. It's also because it's on a curved hook. So when we deal with the mini leech jig, being that it's a straight shank hook, if the skin is facing off the hook shank, it prevents fouling. It increases jigging action and motion because the weight of the skin is heavier than the fur. And it also slows the sinking rate down so it doesn't sink your dry fly. So those three components allow this to be the ultimate jig or weighted mini leech.
And not to mention the number of color combos we've got it in now. We've got it in radiant, we've got it in hot, we've got it in standard. I mean, it is
everything.
Like any way you want to fish a leech now, there's a variation for it, and they all have their time and place.
Yeah, and what you mean by that is, so if we take these two, for example, and that's a great, the representation of what Umpqua supplies to you is amazing because you guys are willing to take on all the colors that work. Didn't matter what the SKU is, didn't matter how many were going to be designed, what's selling more than others. We needed all this series. And when you deal with the mini leech jig, it's got the black bead, olive, black, or brown body. The mini leech has black, brown, and olive body without a bead. And in addition to that, you made the Radiant series with me, which is orange and black, so orange bead, black body, purple and black, pink and white, olive and olive, rust and rust. So that's the Radiant series. And that's seasonally based. Every color is a combo for a specific season, including Runoff. And then it's like, okay, we need an egg-sucking leech. And then we came up with the hothead.
Because when they're on the egg-sucking leech, man,
they're on it. Yeah,
it's amazing.
And it's a simple bead, but it's the fact that you were willing to do that to where the angler, the consumer, reached out and said, we need this hothead mini leech and egg-sucking leech in a smaller form. You know, downsizing can be one of the best ways to trigger a larger trout, especially when the fish are selective or in clear water scenarios. So that really works well.
Speaking of larger trout, there was a big one you caught on one of these leeches.
Sure,
Just like for like 1 second, give us a tail of that fish.
Yeah, so the fish that you're referring to is the one I caught out of the Great Lakes.
It was on the cover of Fly Fisherman, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, it's my biggest trout to date, and it was really, just immersed. It was one of those fishing moments too where it was super fun because we were swinging high water, similar to my experiences in doing steelhead, you know, in Oregon, and you're sitting there swinging for a long time hoping you get a grab. And seeing the backs of these salmon coming up, and literally like kings were coming up with all the other species. And I thought, when I got this grab and I saw the roll, the porpoise, and then the head shake to follow, it was pretty far downstream. I thought, man, it's a king. And then that moment where
king on a mini leech would be cool too.
It'd be cool, right? I'm like, sweet score, you know. So we get it in close, and literally Zach goes in and net the fish, and we've got the big boat net, and goes in to scoop, and he's like, dude, it's a brown. And I'm like, no way, it's a brown. So I mean, the Great Lakes, especially Michigan, can host some of the largest brown trout in the world, known to grow in excess of 40, even up to 50 pounds. So to experience that on the fly that not only you tied, but you designed, it was a thankful and, you know, a very pristine
moment. The most humble thing I've ever heard.
The most humbling experience.
Yeah, but sort of describing the fish of a lifetime. It's like, you know, I thought it was a bigger king. It's just a brown trout.
It was crazy. I mean, the whole experience to me, I think I enjoyed that more to where I didn't know what the species was because it was more the moment of getting the grab. It was more the technique and the ability to get a fish swinging
like,
flies.
The flies worked.
And you know, perfect. I mean, it's the steelhead experience. It's like you work your butt off to get that one grab, and it's more gratifying than if you were just straight nymphing a run. Nothing to take away from that, but it's a challenging technique. So the reward was there. It was like, it was pretty magical.
That's
Definitely
amazing.
Thankfully, it was fun.
Well, let's move on to another fly that has a life of its own, and again, very outside of the box. You came up with, we think of mayflies, and we think spinners, we think on top. Yes. And you've got something very different, so would you introduce the next fly to us?
Yes, the Sink It Spinner. The most simple but valuable information I was given by a client as a full-time guide at Colorado Fishing Adventures. Third year guiding. Guy shows up for a trip, Steve, and he's like, I'm gonna tell you something, young man. When in doubt, sink it. And I'm like, no idea what we're even getting into. I don't even know what this means. So we get up to the water. He's an amazing dry fly angler. We have pods of fish, and you guys know we've all been there together, like sipping tricos, going crazy in the slicks. Fish are coming up nonstop, and you're hoping that one fish comes up and sucks in your dry. And he was literally putting a micro split shot in front of his second trailing dry fly and swinging it through these pots of fish and breaking down by catching almost all of the fish in every pot.
Crazy.
Crazy. From top to bottom, because the fish never saw him coming. He was way upstream swinging down to the fish. And at the end of the day, I'm like, man, that is unbelievable. When in doubt, sink it. So for years, that's what I did. Micro split shot, sink the second trico below dry fly, swing it through the run. And when a trout doesn't have to break the surface to feel safe below, you still get that bulge rise. You're like, oh man, I can still see it. Woo. Set the hook, get the pole. It's all there. So then I decided, design a fly. After I designed the tails up trico, let's add a bead. But instead of just adding a bead, replace plastic wings with scudback rubber wings, which are more supple. So you don't get the helicopter effect in flight when you're designing the fly, and then you start retrieving or presenting the fly. It doesn't spin, doesn't ruin the tip or leader. The small micro bead, 1.5 brass bead. So it's not a tungsten, it's not a plastic, it's in between.
Just to nice break the surface, like you said.
Get it down. And then behind the wings is the hackle to represent the legs. So when this thing is sunken, when in doubt, sink it, meaning that when all the spinners are on the surface and the hatch is over, or you deal with turbulent water below the slicks, which oftentimes is the case, you can extend the afternoon bite or even the dry fly bite by sinking your dries. Even if you're nymphing them deep 3 or 4 feet in a run in the afternoon, those fish are still gauged and interested in that hatch, because a lot of those food supplies are swept below the surface, and that's how we came up with the PMD.
Which is super cool, because especially this time of year when you're talking about trico, betas, PMD.
Yeah.
I mean, we can fish some of those hatches in a lot of high water. And like,
huge.
You said it earlier, that turbulent water will knock them down.
Yeah.
And I think for, again, a fly for runoff, you know, not only runoff, but obviously other applications, it makes a ton of sense.
It does. It does. It's a great bug, and one that I use now as a staple, and you can adjust the wing size and coloration. There's so many different opportunities to adjust the color of the body, and it's tied on, again, a 2488H, which is a money fly.
Big fish hook.
Yeah, I mean, literally, you could hook a shark with that thing. It's not going to straighten out. It's ridiculous. So that on a dry, and then sink it. So it's one of my go-tos for nymphs and also dry dropper scenarios.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, now we're going to talk about 2 new flies from you that just came out in our new catalog here, and we're super excited. We've got them in fly shops. And as we talk about, we're going to get into it here in the technique side, but it's not just about rivers during runoff.
Right.
It's about stillwater too. And so we've got 2 incredible new stillwater flies. Why don't you introduce, we'll work from the bottom up.
Okay, perfect.
On this one.
Perfect. So it's, what I'm excited about with this bug too is just how much attraction you get out of the fly, but it's one of the most important food supplies, chironomids. Amazing. And this is the Trident tube midge. And it's evolved from
King Trident here.
King Trident. It's evolved from one of the first submissions to Bruce back in 2007 was the tube midge. And the tube midge is unique. And again, I've worn tires out there that in designing this fly or the Trident, you need to do this pre-double IPA. Never post.
No doubt.
No blurry vision, because you're putting wire inside of microtubing.
Which gives it an incredible effect.
Yeah, clear segmentation, and it is the effect that when you seine and you look at these in your hand or you look at them in any container with water, like they're moving, it's clear segmentation, a clear body with segmentation.
And just that glow that tubing gives it, again, when you put chironomids especially into a little vial and you look at them, they have this little glowing outer, which the Trident matches perfectly.
A sheen and shine, I appreciate that. So the tube midge was designed for the rivers and some of the still waters, but a smaller form. And then the Trident, the same application, small wire, clear microtubing, or mix up the colors, but that's the combo. And then we have a little flash behind the ostrich collar. And the biggest thing that stands out, Brian Chan and some of the other still waters, Denny, all the guys over the years that I would idolize looking at their rigs and how they fished, especially Brian with chironomids. It was a white bead as an attractor, or maybe, you know, representing a gill tuft, and then behind that was the body. So I thought, why not do a black bead and then the white ostrich collar, which breathes. And ostrich is great because it still holds its form and value below the surface. A little flash behind that, and then what's new is that underneath, when you see this up close, it also has that orange wing bud, a little orange resin hot spot. which is important for some of those pupating food supplies to the surface. The trout identify to that, and you guys have it now in 4 different colors, which is great, just like the radiant.
And you'll find that you're going to, some days they're on red, other days they're on black, and
totally
being able to fish a couple of those in combo with each other to try to figure out what color they're on.
Yeah.
It can be the difference between a 10-fish day and a 100-fish day.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you guys picked up the green and blue. So probably the most overlooked color for chironomid is green. And you get, you know, the bloodworm effect where the chironomids are hovering just above the mud bottom deep, 25 feet. A lot of these can appear red, some of them appear green. And as their bodies fill up with gas and they start to pupate and emerge towards the surface, they get that sheen and shine. So that's where we get the black and silver, the red and copper. So we get the combos that we need that's gonna allow you to hit both stages that trout are identifying with.
And one of the cool things about chironomids, again, as we talk about runoff and the little period we're entering into, this is the first major hatch on these still waters.
Oh, huge, yeah.
And, you know, over in the UK, they call them buzzers just because of the clouds of buzzing noise that come off.
Yeah, what'd you say? Buzzing above you, right.
And so I think it's just it's a perfect one to talk about, to put on the rig, make sure you're going out on the lake with those.
Yes.
It can be absolutely magical.
It is, yeah. And, you know, another key thing about chironomids, which I wrote about this, and Rick Takahashi was kind enough to put it in his book over, I think it was close to 15 years ago now, Modern Midges. I mean, huge supply of different midges and recipes. But the biggest thing that I found with chironomids is that I don't always apply the application of drifting or presenting this to trout in still waters. It's also rivers. You know, the migration of a fish up a river system, a lot of times there are some of the fish that remain residents, but a lot of these are just seasonally based movements. So those fish come up the river, and yeah, they're going to see smaller bugs. They're not going to forget the true home base. So if you fish these larger flies in smaller tailwaters, what you get as far as results is endless. It can work really well.
Totally,
Yeah,
totally. Good mix-up pattern.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll talk to us about your last signature fly we're going to feature here today.
This one gets me, I got goosebumps now. Okay, and you guys have been with me both, Russ and Jake, who's behind the lens doing the masterful work. We've fished the damsel hatch. Now, the thing that drove me nuts about damsels for years, I mean, you get what we call a big fish chop. Big fish chop can range from like 1 to 3 inch chop, or you really get that little surf going 6 to 12 inches, and you're like, big fish love this because it's like a house above with a roof, you know, they feel safe. And you see all the damsels that are just buzzing everywhere, beautiful male and female damsel nymphs and flies everywhere. So damsel nymphs swim on shore, break out of their shuck, becomes adults, just like a stonefly, 2 stages of life. The representation of the adult stage was difficult because most of the patterns, even the greatest patterns that I've fished for many years, Borgers, anybody's of the past, they looked great, designed well, but they sink. It's the biggest factor.
Well, you want this to mule one of your mini leech jigs.
Exactly, you hit it. Yeah, this is the mothership, right?
Yeah.
So the challenge for me was when I designed this fly, it took many years for it to come in hand. It wasn't the act of designing a fly that looked cool. It was more buoyancy based and what the trout would see below. So the coolest thing about this mix-up, just like a chubby Chernobyl, is you get the foam body with the post coming out of the top. And the foam's great because when you stick legs to the side, it's like a canoe with anchors. It doesn't sink, it doesn't tilt, it doesn't tip, right? And the cool thing about this fly is when you look at it from below, instead of the top rubber clear legs representing the legs, they actually represent the wings. 4 wings on the damsel spread out to the side. And behind that is black flex floss, which is the back legs, also anchors for the dry fly. So when this lands on the surface and the extension of the damsel abdomen going all the way back, and we mark it with permanent marker, from below, not only does this not sink, but below it has that slim profile. It represents legs, slim body, and wings. The 3 identifying marks the trout. So when this thing's out there and you're seeing it in the waves, you can, when you buy them, they have a big tuft. If you tie this, you can extend the tuft, mix and match the body. And then below this, oh man, this is what gets me excited.
Numero uno right here.
Right. This is ridiculous. So you can hang that in 6 inches of water. And both of these food supplies move, whether it's a leech or a damsel nymph, the mini leech jig damsel. When you're stripping this fly and it's stripping the one below, it's representing the natural movement of the dry. So in choppy water, you leave it still. It has its own movement. In still water, you literally move it and you get the same action. So when trout see this, it's almost like a non-escaping food supply. They have to eat it.
So we just took a look at 4 of Landon's signature patterns with Umpqua. His whole portfolio is available on umpqua.com. You're going to find all of these flies at your specialty retailers. So make sure to check these out. We've got 3 other flies I just want to touch on quickly that are awesome for runoff.
Totally.
The first one I'm going to pick up here is Garrison Doctor's new Flexi Stone. This is a new one that we just came out with. Stone flies, runoff. I mean, it's a must-have.
Yeah. For tailwaters, free stones, and even stillwater as a tractor. You've got 3 beads on the bug. You've got the profile of the stone fly, the flexi legs that allow it faster sinking rate.
And it's made out of the same tubing as the El Flexo crab.
Yeah, that's
and so like it just, you know, it allows that thing to not have a lot of mass as it falls to the water. So it reaches depths quickly without having to be like ridiculously heavy.
It's very important. Yeah, that's a great looking bug.
And just, yeah, tons of movement to this thing.
Yes.
Garrison really hit it out of the park. Super unique way to use that flexi tubing that,
I like that.
Really hasn't been in the trout world yet.
Add that segmentation, man. You crushed it. That's awesome. Great bug.
The other one that was a request of our host here.
Yes.
Someone that you spent a lot of time fishing with. Why don't you talk about that one quickly?
Yeah, JB designing the Bars Visidon. So Bars Visidon, you're talking versatility. You can change the color of the body and the size and literally fish one dry fly for the remainder of your experiences with trout. It could be the Visidon. That's how productive it is. Being that he glued the post on the top of the thorax, you can make that longer, or it allows you visibility when it moves, versatility for matching the hatch. And if you need to, you can even cut the hackle below. But I love the slim body profile, the hackle, and most importantly, the fact that you have the tuft as a tracking device when you're dropping something below like a sink it spinner. You can really see this thing from a country mile away.
I think it's hard to imagine a world where John Barr didn't design flies.
I know.
Because we've all fished so many of his patterns,
Absolutely.
And they're so freaking good.
They're amazing.
They're amazing. So the Bars Visidon, every conceivable mayfly hatch out there,
yes.
And that'll keep you fishing
yes.
on the lakes, in
yes.
the big water,
yeah.
all that stuff.
Absolutely.
The third one we're going to take a look at is another new pattern for Umpqua this year. Josh Smitherman out of the Hill Country in Texas ties these. You brought this up and you said, hey, are there any cool new crane flies out there? And I was like, absolutely there are. This is a super sweet new one. Why don't you talk to us about the importance of crane flies during that runoff period?
Yeah, crane fly larvae, amazing. Giant body and a huge protein food supply for trout. The cool thing about crane flies, they'll kind of freak you out. You put them in your hand when they're dry or drying off from the river, you pet them and you watch them extend to almost 3 inches from a 1-inch base. When trout see this, it's like a leech. It's a non-escaping food supply. People are intimidated to fish a crane fly because I don't believe they're as comfortable or familiar with the food supply or the bug itself.
Totally. Everyone's willing to tie in a stonefly of the same size, 100%. But they're like, what is this little creamy looking thing?
What is this weird giant worm looking snake, whatever it is, freak me out bug. But this I really like because you get the segmentation of the body, the bead to represent a little flash and sinking control, and then also when you get that CDC and that molds to the body, it gives it like a cased effect, which is exactly what you're looking for in the crane fly larva. So this is going to be an awesome bug, and if you don't have this in your box, one that you definitely want to keep. And anytime you're dealing with runoff, even if you don't see them, you want to drip the crane.
Yeah, and I think this is a perfect kind of moment for us to transition into technique, because as we're talking about a lot of the stuff, you know, half of the flies we've got on the table here are kind of lead fly, like you've said it a bunch of times, non-escaping food source. We're like, dude, these are going to be our lead flies. And then we're going to have something kind of impressionistic or match the hatchet behind it. So let's transition. Let's talk about some technique. And we're going to divide technique up a little bit here because we've got rivers to look at during this period. And we've also got non-moving still waters to look at. And it's going to be a really cool kind of dive into this moment we have where it's all starting to fish really good.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a wonderful experience. And I think we discussed it earlier. Fly control, understanding what you're doing for fly selection is very important, still waters and rivers alike. I break my boxes down very simplistic in what you just mentioned. I deal with attractors and naturals. And I use those 2 words because I think it's a better reference for anglers. Attracting flies, leeches, scuds, crane flies, these all attract fish. Matching the hatch, sink it spinners, chronomids, those are matching the actual food supply. Attract them into the lead fly and get them to look at the trailing or the anchor fly. That's a great way to divide your boxes. I have an attractor box. 1 leaf is for still water, 1 leaf for rivers. The natural box the same. If I need to add to that, it's 2 boxes and pucks and the Umpqua chest pack, and I'm ready to roll. And that's really one of the best ways to simplify, keep the detail in all your fly selections, but have confidence in the flies you need to fish.
So as we talk about the runoff period, obviously we're really comfortable talking about river scenarios. I think there's a lot of people that think they hear the word runoff and it's like, dude, rivers are unfishable.
Yeah.
What do people not realize about runoff that they should?
Dirty water produces, 100%.
So you're not afraid of low visibility?
No.
The fish don't leave the river?
No.
Okay. Tell us a little bit more about that.
They move within the river. No, it's a great question. So high and dirty flows, obviously tailwaters. You can rush to fish the tailwater, and it will be clear. There'll still be some water spikes and influence of dirty water. Freestones or headwaters are going to be blown out to many anglers. It doesn't mean it's unfishable. You fish the edges. You literally, it's like the reference of night fishing. Fish at night come out of deep runs to shallow water because they're not worried about predators. Same thing happens in dirty water. They move right to the edge, inches of water even. And those fish will hold there to feed, to not battle the current and still maintain, but most importantly, survive. So dirty waters can produce, and just track it. Like when the flows are up, wait for them to level. And when they level, game on. When they drop, it's really game on. That's what you want to look for. You can fish the influence of water coming when it's up, but it's mainly level in the drop, and it can produce.
So just tell me, spend a little time looking at my hydrographs about where I want to fish.
Sure.
And like, how do you go about picking a spot? Like, you know, you're going to pull up basin kind of stream flow maps and just kind of like figure out what looks good?
You can look at depth, but the biggest thing is looking at the edges.
Oh no, I meant like even picking a river to go fish.
Oh
right?
yeah,
like,
yeah. So you're looking at tailwaters first. Investigate the tailwaters. Look at the headwaters and the freestones, and then look at the influence of how much water is in demand or supplied, and also the width of the water. If it's vast and wide, you're going to have more edges that supply softer zones for fish to hold. If it's more of a narrow setting, you're looking for structure breaks, edges, and tailouts or side eddies.
What's your comfort level for visibility? Are we talking like an inch, 2 inches, a foot? Like what's that?
The comfort level visually is a foot, but I've fished it in 3 inches and still produced. That's where your cranes and attractors and all those come in, and it's quite gratifying when you're in the dirtiest water that looks like chocolate milk and you're pulling out beautiful chrome-looking fish. It's like, oh, that's a cool transition.
Something tells me there's not a lot of people around either.
Not at all. Solitude, and you're learning, and again, most importantly, remaining a student and realizing, oh, dirty water can produce. It's great.
So, you're, again, just to summarize here, you're not going to wade in waist deep and start fishing the center of the run that you normally fish during lower flow.
No. Yeah, you're doing a tuck cast or you're doing an arm roll cast and you're fishing literally feet or inches off the edge.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's great stuff.
That sounds wild. And I'm sure once they get in the big current, they're a lot of fun.
Let them run. Exactly.
So let's talk about something that isn't a moving water at all, right? You refer to them as still waters a lot.
Sure.
It is kind of the other side of the coin when it comes to runoff. We have all of these awesome lakes in Colorado, the South, Platte region. Everyone's got these available to them. I don't care whether it's your local bass pond or it's another great still water in Idaho or Montana.
Absolutely.
Like it is a great way to fish through the runoff period if you don't want to go look at graphs and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So talk to me a little bit about introduction to still waters. What do you look for in a lake? What's kind of the first thing that you approach the water with? A lot of the miles and miles of shoreline, a lot of these big reservoirs. Where do you start?
Yeah, it's very intimidating. It's like an ocean. You're like, what? And especially if you're fishing the edge, you're like, where in the world do I go?
I can cast out 50 feet.
I cannot double haul 300 feet. And so what you do is first off, you look at a map, whether it be the day of or the evening before, investigate the edge, look at the structure, the bays, the points. 3 things I look for that equal success. It's going to be drop lines, intercepting points, and structure. And if I look at an area, and let's say it's a bay, and the bay comes around to a point, you have to intercept fish at that point. Usually at the point when it extends out, there's going to be a portion of it where it's shallow near the edge and it drops steep. That's your drop line. Structure on still water, the 2 biggest components of structure you're going to deal with are going to be structure, meaning rocks or something connected to land. It can even be fallen in banks, erosion, and vegetation, the 2 biggest things. I think early in the season it's going to be more rocks and drop lines. But those 3 things, if you ask yourself, does this area maintain those three components, those three pieces of the menu to equal success, and you'll find more fish.
So if you have all three of them, that's a high likelihood spot for trout.
It's a 10 for trout.
A 10.
Yeah.
It's a great way to, and then even one of those, if it's a really great drop, you're still feeling like that's a 10.
Some confidence for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. In springtime, just remember, ice off does not mean ice only 20 feet off the edge. Ice off equals ice off the water. 50-degree mark. You're looking for that 50-degree mark. You can be 45, 52. The closer you get to 50, the ice is off the surface. The edges are at their warmest point. The fish are cruising the edges.
So, again, you're not wading out up to your chest and seeing how far you can cast out there.
Yeah.
You're standing ankles in the water and fishing that close edge.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's really fun.
So, again, for people that haven't ever really spent the time and gone and committed themselves to a day of it, what's there to love about fishing lakes?
Oh my gosh, I think the biggest thing that you can attest to lakes is that you will become a better angler if you fish non-moving or still water. In rivers, the river supplies moving current, which allows you tension to the fly line, tension to a drift. It doesn't make you a lazy angler, but it's compensating for power. Whether it be loading the rod, delivering the fly, mending the fly line. In still waters, you're responsible for it all. So you have to strip line and retrieve. You have to release that line and double haul to cast or single cast. You have to fight fish and manage slack line to the guide. You have to mend. You have to have control of distance. All of it's in your wheelhouse, and you're responsible for all of it. Only if you have wind, which brings you to the final thing is still water. Always chase the wind. So if the wind's coming right to left, the fish are moving left to right into the wind. It's like a current for a river. If that wind switches, you want to switch to the other side of the reservoir. And most importantly, the wind is blowing the surface heat into the bay. So the core of the reservoir could be 50 degrees, or let's say 45 degrees. All that surface heat blowing into the bay, all of a sudden it's 47 or 50 degrees in the bay. That's where the fish are migrating to. So all of that combined, add that wind factor, and then control of your line, you become a better angler.
The fish size usually isn't, 8-inch stockers either. There's some good ones out there, huh?
All it takes is one fish to rip you into your backing, as you guys know. It gives me goosebumps now. It's ridiculous. It's the closest thing to bonefish. And it's like when you're a kid and you're looking at the bobber and you're wondering, 4 years old, what kind of Loch Ness monster is below. You hook a giant, your dry fly dips, and you're like, oh, that could be the one. And the fish is gone, and you're hooked for life. It's like, whoa. That was an adrenaline rush.
It truly is a different game. The fish are built different. It's a different way to play.
Power.
Again, we talked about it at the very beginning. As soon as you enter into something new, it's like, I'm a beginner. I'm super in this. I want to learn as much as I can. And I think if this hasn't been your year to do it, make this your year to fish some still waters and figure that out.
Totally. Yeah, you'll love it.
You'll love it.
Yeah.
I agree. And the flies we talked about from Landon are going to be perfect options for that. So we're going to transition. We're going to talk about some gear for Runoff. Yeah. We talked about some attractor stuff, some real match the hatchie stuff. I think what I'd love to know from you, Landon, is how do you kind of organize all this stuff you talk a lot about days where I can fish river in the morning, lake in the afternoon, or vice versa. How do you, to me, that sounds like you're going to carry 100 boxes. Yeah,
it's difficult, and that's the challenge. People show up sometimes with a bag full of boxes, and you're trying to cipher through them and figure out what you're going to work with. It is challenging, and less is more. Core confidence of flies, 12 or a baker's dozen, 13. Those are what you want to work with and choose from. I break it down, a very simple approach, but attractors and naturals. Attractors that attract the fish in are something that's a bigger food supply, cranes, leeches, eggs. Naturals being betas, whether it be the nymph or the dry fly sunken or a Trident tube midge, chironomids. Have a selection of both. And then you have a lake box with one leaf that's attractor, one that's natural. You have a river box, one leaf natural, one attractor. And those are probably a lot of the same flies on the attractor side. Yes. Yeah, very similar. And that's the nice combo is you're breaking it down that way to where if the fish comes over and looks at the attractor and, oh, there's the natural trailing or anchored below, it'll take that. And then the box in the middle is going to be the dry flies. And I carry a dry fly box that has 20 compartments in it. Each one of them opens up and it folds together as one box. That's all my 20 dries. So I have that in the middle, the two boxes on either side, and you're ready to rock. The reason I wanted to grab Landon's pack here, this is Umpqua's ZS2 wader chest pack, super versatile. You can hook it onto a belt loop, onto your wader straps. I know you rock it on your wader straps, right? Yes.
I wanted to show this because this thing has seen some days out on the water and seen some fish. A couple flies have been put in that fly patch. But tell me why this is your go-to.
It's great. It's super simple. It's small. I love the open compartment. You can fit 3 boxes inside. Tools on the outside, tippet, hemos, nippers, dry fly shake when needed. And it's such a high area of your body that when you're out there waiting and needing to get deep, whether it be the river at Runoff or still waters, keeps everything out of the water, keeps it dry. And it's right there as a working station. Very small, concise, and less is more. I mean, you're hiking. If I'm doing 10 miles a day, 200 days a year, I can't carry a larger pack, man. It'll like, my lumbar's hurt, you know, it'll get you. So this thing's super, super effective, very durable. I also love the component of the fly patch in the front. Just when you're mixing and matching, when you're cutting flies, you put them right in the front. And again, just being able to go from chest to belt is very ideal, because then, you know, areas or locations where you don't have to wade deep, it's gonna work for you. And it's tested tough, man. This one, I get about 250 days out of the pack. It's not that the pack can't still work, but for a little bit better appearance and also fresh goods and everything else included, I just replace one a year because I do that many days guiding, and it's worked well, man. I love it.
We brought Landon a fresh one. I wanted to show off
this one's got some juice on it. Yeah,
well-used one here.
Well used.
The other thing that I know you and I have talked about a ton is just the Umpqua products that Umpqua sells.
Yes.
Just such an incredible line here.
Yeah.
The green top spray is my personal favorite, but like,
amazing.
will you tell me a little bit about how you utilize some of those Umpqua floatants in your guide days?
Absolutely. So the first, and it's 3 stages. So you have a dry fly like this, right? You're just going to take a little bit of paste, and Dry Magic is amazing. It's the paste that coats the fly. Take a little bit in your fingers, rub your fingers together, and you just paint this over all the material on the fly.
Anything that you want to float.
Anything you want to float. And then after that, when you have this dressed, it's like the base that you can't penetrate any one of the materials because it's going to be coated and protected.
Fun little story on this.
Yeah.
We had a fly shop that took Dry Magic and rubbed up a Copper John.
Yeah.
And it floated for a week.
I believe it, 100%. That is incredible because it's true. And then what happens for me, so a dry fly, remember it has to be dry, coat it with the Dry Magic, grab the shake. When you grab the shake, you're literally just going to hit it once or twice, spray the fly, right? Once you spray the fly, this thing will float for 30 presentations, if not more, casting out far, drifting back, or drifting the river's edge. And when you need to dry this off, Bounty paper towel. Always have it with you. Just literally soak up the moisture, resupply. But the cool thing about it is once you soak up the moisture, you still have that coating. All you have to do is come back a second time, spray the fly, and you're ready to go. And the adhesive that's in the dry fly spray matched to the coating that's in Dry Magic, it literally will float this fly where you can have one dry fly, one big mothership like the chubby damsel. You can fish that thing all day long. It's amazing.
And it changes. It's so funny. Anytime I'm like, man, that should have gotten a bite.
Yeah.
I'll take this and just like respritz.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it just wasn't floating that much higher.
That much higher.
And it with the spray, it takes like a second. And you're like back out there and you're like,
So
oh, there's
easy.
the bite.
Yeah. And you know what? It's speed is efficiency. And the more efficient you are in the water, the more fish you catch. Think of the time it takes to shake a fly, the maintenance, and half the shake goes in the air and blows away in the wind. You're like, oh man, I shook too much. 2 sprays,
too
one
much.
spray. That's it. No more shakes.
Yeah, and at the ready. Well, Landon, thanks so much for kind of previewing your bag here. I hope you guys have enjoyed this Flies 4 as much as I have. Learned a ton from Landon today. If anyone wants to learn more, where are they getting a hold of you, Landon?
Yeah, through the website, LandonMayerFlyFishing.com. You can do Landon Mayer Fly Fishing, Instagram, and Facebook. It's on the water. Once I get off the water, be able to contact you, and all the flies and everything available with Umpqua. You can also find those in my book, Guide Flies, the step-by-step tutorial on how to tie these bugs. Super cool.
And that's not your only book.
No.
You've got a number of other publications you guys should check out too.
Yeah, right on the website. Yep, happy to share the sight fishing for trout, hunting giant trout. It's been a great example of being able to teach when you're off the water the things you learn on the water throughout the course of the year. So it's fun.
Well, sweet. What's next for Landon?
Exciting. So I've got a couple travels coming up. I'm doing Argentina again in spring of next year for Dorado. I've got full season for guiding this year. I've got a new fly time video coming out with Headwater Media Group. We filmed it last fall, so it has all the flies, the video, production on how to tie these bugs, reference of the Umpqua stories and background, and fishing with you guys. And it's going to be a great value or addition to the book Guide Flies. You can go through the reference of the pages, see the video production side of it, to where you can see the little nuances, similar to what we did today, but in the 60-minute format with each one of the bugs.
Amazing. Well, guys, definitely check out Landon. I hope you learned a couple things and find your best day out fishing the runoff period that you're going to have in the Rocky Mountain West especially. If you guys like this content, please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on our next episode of Flies 4. Thanks for tuning in.